Hi there, I'm Sean Osterlink, and this is Overcoming with ACT. Today I'm going to continue this series that I have been on with counselor skills, just giving a brief description on different types of counselor skills that we use, and on the theme of why come to counseling and why pay us. Like, what are we doing? Because you just come in here and we talk to you or we listen to you, and why does that deserve money or something like that? Like I'm making a case for it or something. So today I wanted to talk about two different concepts that we do as counselors, and one of those is blocking, and the other one is confrontation. And so I thought I would elucidate what those are. So blocking is a term for basically stopping an interaction that's happening in the counseling process in the session. This mostly comes up with couples or with families, and to block is to verbally step in and stop some sort of interaction that's happening. If a couple or a family is getting into an argument with one another and it's not really productive anymore, if things are getting really heated, something is escalating, then that's the point where it's our job to engage in that by with whatever skills may seem right in the moment. One of those skills can be to be blocking, and that would basically be to, hey, you're just arguing with each other at this point. This isn't productive. Let's pause. Let's stop here. Let's reset. Something like that. I mean, it really depends on the context and how things are going as far as what my tone of voice is going to be and what kind of words I'm going to use to engage with the clients with intervening in what's happening there. But it would be something to that effect of, here's what's happening and it's not productive. And I've talked about, well, maybe I haven't talked about, but one of our skills is to reflect what the present process is going on in a session. And so that's likely something that I would use during blocking, to state just what is happening in this and how this is unfolding. But first and foremost, we need to stop, right? That there's no point in paying me just to argue and chew each other out or something like that. How part of the process of working through things with a couple or a family is to see what dynamic is going on. That's part of emotionally focused therapy, is to look at what is the cycle of conflict, what is the pattern of how people engage with one another. And I do want to work with those real feelings, those emotions that are coming up when I'm working with more than one person in the room. And so it can be useful, certainly, to allow some levels of conflict to happen in the room, absolutely, and to work with that energy and to work with what's really real and what happens outside of the session. But again, blocking is when it's just going to a degree that's too far and it's no longer productive. So that could probably be really subjective. So I just got to use my clinical decision-making skills with that. And then the next point is confrontation. So much of therapy is being soft and gentle and reflecting and empathizing and summaries and things like that. And so confrontation isn't something that we use a lot as therapists, but it is something that we do use at times in therapy and need to be mindful of when we're going to use that and how we're going to use that. I'll say there's maybe two different ways that I think of confrontation being used, and I would say maybe predominantly, just as I'm thinking about this right now, like there's the confrontation that occurs as clients are working through their thought processes, and okay, here are the automatic thoughts happening in response to maybe a trigger, and here's these beliefs that are underlying it. And there can be stuff there that from a CBT, cognitive behavioral approach, want to work on challenging and reframing. And so there's a sense of confronting the thoughts or the beliefs themselves. And so that would be working with the client collaboratively on how can we look at confronting this thought content to challenge it in a new way. And so that's where Socratic questions would come in, which we talked about in, I think, one of the previous episodes I've done here. And so there's maybe challenging as far as me and the client are both looking at this thing, and they're on board, and we're both challenging a thought process or an unhelpful or negative belief system or something like that we want to work on reframing or looking at from different angles. And so there's that sort of challenging. And there's maybe challenging in the sense of pointing out a process that's going on in the therapy session. And so reflecting, I mentioned before, reflecting the present process. I might as well just put that on the board here since I'm talking about it. Present process, or reflect that present process. And so just lump these together while I'm talking about them. And so what I mean when I'm talking present process here is what's going on in the session. What is the dynamic going on in the room? When working with individuals, that present process is what is the dynamic between me and the client going on in here? Gotta get a drink. My throat gets dry while I'm talking on here. And so that would be, what's the therapeutic relationship like? And what are patterns that I'm noticing as I'm working with a client? Is what's going on in here? Talking about what is this relationship like? What is happening right now? We can be in the content of something, talking about a particular subject, and maybe somebody looks really fidgety while we're talking about a subject. That could be one example. And so if I were to notice something body language wise, or maybe I notice a tone of voice changes, or something about what their emotional response changes. So reflecting present process would be to kind of pause from content and go into that process, and to go, well, I noticed as we're talking about this that I noticed that something about your body language changed, or I noticed something about your voice changed, or maybe I noticed, maybe it's more broad than that, maybe I've noticed in these sessions as we've been working together that this kind of pattern unfolds. And so that would be client to the therapist to client, present process, and with couples especially, and again with EFT kind of therapy, reflecting the present processes. Well, I noticed here what's happening between when you talk to your partner and when you talk to them about this issue, that maybe one of you becomes more closed off, one of you becomes more quiet, the other person, maybe their voice gets louder, and I might interject there. I might reflect possible feelings that could be occurring there, or possibly like deeper primary feelings that link to attachment needs or things like that. And so kind of pulling those things into it as well to deepen that experience and that insight for the client. But that's what reflecting present process is. And so going back to confrontation, there could be a confrontation as far as calling out that process that's going on. Kind of see those as going together. Again, maybe going back to an example of a couple that's fighting, there could be the confrontation, there could be blocking. Hey, you guys are just getting into an argument here. This isn't productive. Let's pause. Let's stop here and reset. There's reflecting that present process of sharing about the unfolding of that event. Here's what I observed happen and how this thing escalated into this conflict. And with that, there's the lumped in there is that confrontation of going, just here's what I see happening in front of me. So I guess that would be kind of, that sense it would be the same, maybe the same thing. I don't know. I'm just thinking of this on the fly, right? So then, of course, the last aspect of that, or maybe the thing that comes most to mind with confrontation, would be confrontation as far as confronting something in a problematic sense. Confronting, for instance, say, confronting avoidance that's happening, confronting maybe avoidance that's happening within the therapy session itself. It could be confronting avoidance, again, between a couple or family, between these members, and something that's not being addressed between them, or confronting a repeated pattern that's unfolding in the room. Or it could be working with an individual and confronting some issue, going, hey, I noticed this, this is a problem, and really just speaking directly to that thing. And so again, confrontation is something that you want to use sparingly and carefully and thoughtfully, because it requires good rapport. And with good rapport, confrontation can be something that strengthens the therapeutic relationship and helps the client make some progress and maybe get over a hump somewhere. At the same time, if the rapport isn't strong enough to withstand something just directly being confronted, then you do run the risk of them feeling judged, criticized, hurt by that, of not wanting to, continue working with you, right? Or being hurt or offended, something like that. What would be, I'd probably have to sit and think about it as far as what would be issues that would require a direct confrontation, as this is a problem. Could be things like repeated tardiness, repeated cancellations, missing appointments, things like that. Could be something where it's actually affecting me, the therapist. That's not something that I really had much to deal with, but that's just an example that comes to mind that would warrant where something could be actually impacting the therapy and the client-therapist relationship and need to be confronted directly. Perhaps repeated avoidance of doing homework, not following through with things, not really following through with things in the therapy process, to where it might be kind of like, what's going on here? What's your level of motivation? Something like that might be something. Maybe confront would be too strong a word, but just to address directly. Maybe there's a spectrum of the gentle addressing versus more firm addressing. But yeah, so there can be situations, certainly in again, where things are becoming heated. If they're becoming heated conflicts, those can be situations where a more harsh and direct confrontation of some issue may be warranted, but at the same time, you're playing with fire there when doing that. So those are my thoughts on that subject right now, and these are just more of the things that as therapists we've got going on in our heads over here as we're working with clients, all the while trying to be just here in the present with you. And hey, maybe I'll make another video on that, just where our heads are at least ideally when we're in it, because these things are kind of going on in the background. And then there's also staying just right where you're at with the client, right? Because we want to be here now with you and not too caught up in thinking space and thinking about maybe processes or homework or plans that we have as far as where we want a conversation to go and things like that. It is a certain sort of juggling process to stay in the present and stay very there with the client and what you're sharing, while also being mindful of just all these other elements of what's going on. So I'll stop now. Thank you if you're watching this and hanging out with me during this video. I appreciate that. And if you like this kind of stuff, please like and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.